was really necessary to find out all the information that I needed about where the tip minimum wage came from, its legacy in slavery, the data around sexual harassment and tipping.
Poached sat down with Adam Orman of Locadoro in Austin, Texas, to talk about how the community is at the forefront of building a more sustainable restaurant industry. Orman and his business partner founded the group Good Work Austin to help small businesses figure out how to uplift their work environment, whether by raising wages, offering benefits, or giving back to the community. So let's get to it.
Well, thanks for joining us and doing this not live.
Oh yeah, well, that was what made it possible for me to just leave.
Just to get started, do you want to share a little bit about Locadoro and your role there and how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. So Locadoro is the Italian restaurant that I co-own in Austin, Texas, with my business partner, who is the chef, Fiore Tedesco. We met 11 years ago now in Austin. Both of us are from the Northeast originally. He is Italian, I am Jewish, and we realized we had the same kinds of food loves growing up, and worked together for a little bit before on pop-ups and catering. We were doing these music themed dinners, and realized that we kind of both wanted, we'd both been in hospitality for most of our adult lives, and had wanted to open a restaurant, and Italian was definitely what he cooked and was usually what my family ate when we went out. So it was a good match, and we found a space in a neighborhood, not too far from downtown, but definitely a more kind of family friendly neighborhood, a little more residential, right across the street from a children's museum, which was what we were looking for. We wanted somewhere that was going to be a neighborhood spot that was going to have regulars and where our kids could come and be comfortable. And that opened. So this opened in 2016, okay. And blessedly, we are still here.
Yeah. And so it sounds like community has kind of always been the basis of your business, wanting to have it in like a neighborhood spot where you could bring your kids and others could bring their kids and kind of create that atmosphere.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the first thing that helps make a restaurant, that helps build a restaurant, is knowing that you've got a solid base of regulars. I guess the other version of that would be to be downtown and be near the convention center and know that you have a solid base of tourists.
Right.
But I mean, nothing like a global pandemic to let you know that regulars are a more reliable community to build around than tourists.
Would you say that you may have been in a little bit of an advantage being a little closer to the neighborhoods where, when everyone was working from home, they were still had a spot that they could go to? Or do you feel like it was sort of basically like a give and take, where it was sort of revenue neutral?
Yeah, it wasn't so much that people could, we stayed closed. We were closed for completely for 13 months. And Texas actually reopened, or made it possible for restaurants to reopen in May of 2020, only 6 weeks after the initial shutdown. So people could go out, and that was not a possibility at Locadoro. But what it meant was that when we started a subscription program and we're doing weekly pickups, our customers, our guests, our community, that's where the loyalty showed up, was that people were coming to pick up their pasta bags every week or their wine subscriptions, and we're doing what they could to support us because they wanted to make sure that their neighborhood restaurant was still going to be there on the other side.
That's great.
Yeah.
One of the things that really drew us to you when we first learned about your business was your commitment to your staff as well, and creating an environment where you're professionalizing the roles and trying to raise wages and offer more for your employees. How has community kind of helped you achieve that? And what are your, can you touch a little bit on like your values as a business owner with that?
Yeah. So I had most recently been in California before coming here. And by the time I left, I think it was still just a $9 an hour state. But I had seen what happened when the sub minimum wage was attached. It stayed attached to the federal minimum, to the city minimum wage. There was a fight in the early 2000s. They were going to raise the city minimum wage in San Francisco, and whether or not, and there was the argument was whether the discussion was whether or not to leave the tipped minimum wage at $7.25 or to have it continue to go up every time the city raised their minimum wage. And that's what was decided, was that it should continue to go up. So there was lots of creative things that started happening, and I just got to see what people's paychecks looked like and how managers and owners responded to that. So when we moved here, when we opened here, there was really no question that we were going to pay at least the federal minimum wage to everyone, and use a service charge to do it instead of doing hospitality included, because there was no other precedent. There weren't really any other restaurants doing hospitality included, Central Texas. So we knew we were going to be fighting upstream a little bit, and we wanted to make sure we weren't fighting upstream a whole lot. So we did that, and it was hard. There were just lots of conversations that I wasn't entirely prepared for with staff or with customers. And that was when the community built. That was when building or finding a community of other restaurants started. I found a couple of the national labor organizations, Restaurant Opportunity Center, and then One Fair Wage, and met other restaurants across the country that were trying to answer the same questions, usually in different legislative environments. So some places that were 213, some places like San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, that were already One Fair Wage states. And it was really necessary to find out all the information that I needed about where the tip minimum wage came from, its legacy in slavery, the data around sexual harassment and tipping, the data around race and tipping, and be able to use that to talk to staff and to talk to guests and explain, look, part of this is about just making sure that our staff makes a living wage, and that the cooks and servers are on a more equal footing, that nobody in this restaurant is going to be making 4 times what somebody else does. And then part of it is about sexism and racism and history. So that was indispensable for us to be able to message and continue. I think the other part of it is that we heard how people were doing it, and there are lots of different methods. This is not something where there's just different restaurants in different places require different models. And then also hearing the other benefits that people were providing that make it easier for servers to potentially make a little bit less. How are you doing paid time off? What are you doing for healthcare? What are you doing how are you scheduling so that, so that you're adding all of these other things, like you said at the beginning, to professionalize, so that, all right, yes, you can go work somewhere else and probably make more hourly, but we need to make it worth your while to be a part of our crusade, and stay here, and work 4 or 5 nights a week, to make what would be a living wage. But that's what we want, is people who are here full time, and being able to take advantage of the benefits that we provide. And like I said, I think the other restaurants that I heard all of those other pieces from, have made our journey possible.
Yeah. And so is that how you kind of got started with Good Work Austin as well? Like, can you touch a little bit about what Good Work Austin does and how you started that?
Yeah. The what Good Work Austin started as and what it is now are really interesting. So we were asked, along with a bunch of other small businesses in Austin, to help write the paid sick leave ordinance in 2017, 2018. And when that passed in Austin, it was immediately challenged and went by the in the courts. So I was asked to go testify and listen to the other businesses that were testifying against, and that were talking about the burden that it was going to place on them. And I just knew that I could see where they were coming from, but I knew that it didn't have to be the case. And then we did the same thing. We had to do the same thing at the legislature, as the state legislature has tried to pass laws to ban any ordinances that go above and beyond the state constitution. So that includes paid sick leave. It can include water breaks. It can include things like fracking and plastic bag bans. It was just sort of a universe, and it initially was including non-discrimination ordinances. So in that, the whole group was there again and hearing a lot of the same things from the business lobbies and from other small businesses and other restaurants. And what we left feeling was like two things. We need to have a group, so that is from the owner's side, so that, yes, there's the AFL-CIO, there's Workers Defense, there are labor organizations that are lobbying for these things, but there's no owners organizations, business organizations that are lobbying for benefits or for labor improvements. So can we make that exist? And then two, can we help the other businesses who are saying that this isn't possible? Can we bring them in and hopefully provide support and resources that will make it possible?
Right.
So that's where we started. It was going to be just sort of a knowledge bank, and then progressing towards a point where we could advocate, where we could be advocates. The pandemic changed everything, which is maybe the most unnecessary thing to say these days. But what it did specifically for Good Work Austin is we started, since we were already formed as a nonprofit, we were able to get contracts from the city and county to prepare meals for different food insecure communities in Austin and pay restaurants for those. So we had contracts with Austin Public Health and the school district and emergency operations. And during the pandemic, had about 24 restaurants providing meals to different pantries, transitional shelters, families. There was a freeze that happened in February of 21 that year, when most of Texas lost power and gas for up to a month, up to 3 months in some cases. And since we already had a lot of those relationships with the city and the contracts, and we also had relationships with the restaurants, we ended up becoming kind of the hub for providing meals during that. And then it used 60 restaurants in 2 weeks to provide around 100,000 meals.
Wow.
During that time. So it really increased Good Work Austin's visibility to the public, and also gave us this whole other piece of a mission that we hadn't originally envisioned. Right now, now that we're kind of out of emergency world, we have a board. We have two full-time staff members, and we're working. We provide DEI trainings, sexual harassment prevention trainings, de-escalation trainings through partners in Austin, and we're working on opening a nonprofit cafe that will do workforce training and be able to use our restaurant partners to provide internships for the trainees, and ideally, because hiring is still so difficult, be able to create kind of a whole new pipeline of employees that will be able to go then to work at Good Work Austin restaurants, which are places that are guaranteeing wages and good wages and benefits. So it's a work in progress that has progressed a lot in the past 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool because it seems like you kind of, touching on having to confront a whole bunch of business owners who push back on things like raising wages because it's hard. Like you were already doing it and you recognize like it is hard, but instead of just being like, I'm not going to do it because it's hard, you sought resources, and now you get to, bring it back full circle and provide those resources to your community within the restaurant industry in Austin.
Yeah. And it is still really hard. Getting to a place where everybody is making as much as we want them to is really difficult. It's still difficult in some way, at times, to make sure that we're talking to the staff in the right way about it. It's difficult to make sure that they're making what we want them to be making.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure in any conversations with other restaurant owners to let them know, like, we have not figured out the magic, I don't know, what is it, the silver bullet, the magic, the golden ticket. We change the way that we pay, what benefits we provide, like things are getting tweaked all the time to try and make sure that we're where we need to be, and that we're still viable as a business.
Yeah. And when you did put did you say you put a service charge on your customers? Did you get a lot of pushback initially, or were people just like curious about it?
There was pushback for sure in the first 6 months to a year, and there still is occasionally. The way that we wrote about it on the menu and on the website has changed a lot. It changed a lot in that first year. We made sure to put it everywhere, and that so that folks would know why the service charge was there, and that it was in lieu of a tip, that we weren't expecting. I think that we weren't expecting customers to tip on top of it. I think that's sometimes where it's difficult with the service charges that are less than 20%. There's a lot of like health care charges, I know, in some, especially in California. And that one's tricky because I think customers already don't know how to tip. They already don't know how much their servers are really making, if they're making $2 or $12 or $5. And it can be different. I mean, I think this is still true. If you were to road trip from California to Texas through 5 states, you would probably hit 5 different tipping environments along the way, and you would tip the same. So someone is essentially making more or less for exactly the same job just because guests don't, just because of where they live. Exactly.
Right.
So there was a lot of just making sure that people knew why the service charge was there, and then having it be a full 20%, so that if they leave anything, and we typically get around 4% extra, and then figuring out how to reply to guests who did have issues, and I think by and large they understand now, as soon as and we get way more positive feedback. It's much more in the national conversation than it was 7 years ago as well. But yeah, we get many more people coming back, coming here because they read about us, or they hear in an Eater article or something. There's also the mention of our labor policy. They're not going to come back if the food's not also good.
Yeah.
So a lot of credit goes to chef as well, for still being able to make great food while we're paying the way we are. But yeah, I would say by and large it is now it's overall a positive with guests.
And how did the conversation go with employees? Was there good and bad, or mostly positive feedback when introducing that?
So it was, we were lucky that we introduced it from the beginning. We never had to do a full transition where we said, all right, you guys were making this, but now, we're changing everything and we're going to be sharing tips. So it's hard. I think that we typically, once folks have been here for 6-ish months, and they really see that we live our values the way we say we do, they stay for a while. Getting to 6 months is sometimes tough, to be perfectly honest. So, I think there are there's a lot of distrust in the.
I was going to ask, yeah, it sounds like trust is a huge part of it.
It absolutely is, and that's, I think I shouldn't say I think that is the next stage of how we're paying is to try and make it even clearer where the money is coming from. So instead of what we've been doing over the years, is going from, we started at $8 an hour plus plus a percentage of the service charge and the additional tips, and now we're at least $15 an hour and percentages, and what we want to get to, plus percentages of the service charge and any additional tips. And what we want to get to, and will this year, is an even higher hourly, and the service charge pays for that. So there's no more percentages. You are just going to make somewhere between $20 and $30 an hour, depending on your role in the restaurant, and any additional tips that come in get shared with the staff shares. So we can tell a server, you don't have to worry about percentages. You don't really have to worry about points. When you're a full server, you're going to make $28 an hour. And that's going to be, if it's Valentine's Day, $28 an hour plus the additional tips. If it's Valentine's Day, or if it's a Tuesday in August, in $28 an hour. And we hope that's okay with you.
Yeah.
You know what? This might be sort of a nebulous question, but do you feel like you have any insights as to why trust is such a big factor? Is it, so many, maybe, years of being in hospitality, you might not trust the manager when he has a new pay structure. Is there any reason you've sort of encountered over and over that people don't quite believe you, right, when you say that this is going to be more money for you eventually?
Yeah. I've been very lucky. I've worked I've worked at places where I didn't have to question the owners by and large. Maybe I was naive. I don't think so. But there are just so many stories of wage theft, and a lot of them, some of them hit the headlines. Some of them never will, because the folks who are being exploited aren't going to go public about those kinds of things. But when the whole industry is built on paying employees $2.13 an hour and not requiring any other benefits to be paid out, it's just kind of ripe for exploitation.
Right.
And
basically already are.
What? I'm sorry?
Already are exploited, or just, having a sub minimum wage at all, just seems
right.
I don't know.
Right. So you and you're incentivized by the government in the tax code to pay the $2.13. This is something, that very few people know or understand, that you get that amount from $2.13 to $7.25 credited. So that's what the tip credit, it's called the tip credit, that you don't have to pay. So the amount of money that your employees are making from tips, that $5.12, $5.12 is tax-free. So you're paying less payroll tax for underpaying your employees.
Wow.
Whereas when we decide that we're going to be paying $15 an hour, we pay full freight on payroll tax on that $15 an hour. So there are just so many places where you are incentivized to exploit your workers, and at a lot of places that's okay, and they're making enough money in tips. There's probably somebody there that is making less, as if a server is walking with, you know, $40-50 an hour in tips, and they're keeping all their tips. It's really hard to run a restaurant. There's famously talk about like the 5 to 10% profit margins, which are true in independent, which is a true thing in an independent restaurant, much less true in a large national chain. But if you're working with 5 to 10% margins, and you know that 20% of all of your sales are walking out the door and can't be used to pay the dishwashers, the line cooks, you're going to have to underpay somebody.
Right.
So it's what is needed to, I know this wasn't a question, but what is needed to one shop, even a whole community of restaurants that are in a coalition in Austin can't change, can't make the industry sustainable. What's needed is that big legislative change to get everybody paying proper wages and start treating hospitality employees, like the essential workers that they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and just touching a little bit, because we kind of touched a bit about like what's in the media today, and the sustainability of the restaurant industry. Do you have any thoughts on that? And it's how community fits into creating a more sustainable restaurant industry?
Yeah, I mean, the sustainability question is hard. I when we've lobbied for something like paid sick leave, or we were just approached by a group that has a parental leave bill at the state legislature this year, and it would be paid for by a small tax on businesses. My hope is always, all right, this is a good thing for the world. This is a good thing for the state and my city. We're on board, and I hope that at some point the state will realize that this is a good thing and they will help us out. But if we have to pick up some of the cost to get us there, to prove that this is a good thing, then okay, within reason.
So in a way, you sort of need buy-in to these sort of programs so that you can get them off the ground, and then go back to the state and say, can you help split the difference here so that small businesses don't have to bear the brunt of the responsibility of finding that cash?
Yes. Can we be on board to say, this is a good thing? Let's compromise. Let's figure out how we can make this something that all businesses can afford.
Right.
So I think that getting to that point of compromise and getting to that point of conversation and understanding and at least agreeing on the ways in which the way we pay our employees is broken is the first step, and we're not there. And I really thought that during the pandemic we might get there, but there continues to be a lot of lobbying against raising the minimum wage. So I know that we're not. But the more manageable and more exciting conversation is about what you said about community. I think that initially we thought we're in a neighborhood, our community is our guests and the restaurant, and that's what needs to be strongest. Or that is, but it's bigger than that. And the way that we are tied into city departments and other nonprofits and other small businesses is what is what makes the work easier.
Mhm.
That we're able to have contracts with the city, so that there's an extra revenue stream that comes from actually producing food, rather than some of the things that restaurants talk about, which is like, all right, our dining room is empty during the day. Let's rent it out as a work share space, or let's sell hats, or things that, or let's start shipping food across the country. All these things that are not that are creating another business, really.
Right.
Whereas making 50 dinners a night for a couple nights a week, to go to the shelter, to go to a transitional shelter under a city contract, that's what we do. That's easy, and it makes a big difference financially.
And I imagine it like helps with a lot of things. Like you have more hours to give to your employees. You also have something to do with food waste, right? Like you can take that food that maybe you didn't sell that night and craft it into something that you're doing for this program.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Wow.
And you learn so much from the other nonprofits that are in the food access, food insecurity world. And from the revenue side, they come have their staff parties at your restaurant. It's great marketing to just make yourselves available to the people in your city who share your values, and it doesn't cost anything. It's time. So I feel like that's what, over those first 2 years, and then even more so in the last 3 years, I realized was the best expenditure of my time, was making connections and putting us in positions where we were gonna let people know who we are and what we did, and see how we can help them and how they can help us.
Well, I mean, that's a really good segue into, sort of that, the big question, which is how to, you've already kind of touched on this, but how do other restaurants in different communities around the US, how would they, start finding and creating this sort of community that you've built, locally for yourself?
Also hard. It is hard to, we are not a great industry for communication.
Right.
So but we also are starved for it. So finding those few allies, the other small business owners who want to collaborate instead of compete, and figuring out, can we have our most successful meetings right now for Good Work Austin are when we have something about, maybe something about wage models, but maybe just something about counter service. Maybe the coffee shops want to get together and talk about plastic reduction, or zero waste. Like, especially, that's especially a big topic in places that are mostly to go. And if you start, we started with half a dozen, 6 to 12, maybe a dozen restaurants and small restaurants and bars and coffee shops. And now we send out the newsletter goes out to around 180.
Wow.
And 180 people don't ever come to anything. But if we get 15 people to a morning coffee to talk about service charges, that's amazing. And it really inspires and energizes, I think, everyone, for at least the rest of the day. Just knowing that being able to talk and complain and problem solve with your colleagues is amazing. So I wish that there was a magic bullet that the city brought us together initially, because we had already put ourselves out there. And then it was just a lot of communicating to make sure that we stayed together, and continued working because it mattered.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because it's easy to stay in the status quo, but if you want to make any change, like you need that collaboration and that brainstorming and like coming together. So just making the effort to seek it out with like-minded business owners.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, the saying we started with 6 is really important because I would have hoped that all kinds of really big things would have happened. And they probably haven't, but what other businesses say, luckily it's not what's in my head doesn't matter. So when there's another business that says, oh man, those weekly meetings during the pandemic were what kept us going. That's a big thing. Like just having one business that stayed open is bigger to the employees who work there than if we had had some huge legislative win, or if paid sick leave had been able to stay as the law in Austin. Like keeping businesses open is the best thing you can do. So it's probably the idea of like lowering your standards or lowering your expectations maybe come from parenting, and knowing that like you are making an impact and having wins all over the place that you don't even know.
Yeah. I like that because it can be, when you think of things so massively or globally or nationally, it becomes daunting and seems impossible. But if you can just appreciate, what might seem to one person like a small win, or, just it takes the little steps to make real change. So keep that motivation going.
My old boss called it the brain trust. He would get a bunch of like-minded business people together, and it is really tough, no matter what the platform is, no matter, what the vertical is. There's a lot of people that are nervous about talking about how they do business with, potential competitors. But it does seem to be true that, raises all ships, right? I mean, if you change the culture, kind of one person at a time, you can affect, more and more people, with small little movements.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I just, it's easy in the restaurant industry to not see I think it's really easy to not see the other locally owned businesses as your competition.
Right.
We are all competing with with businesses that are much better resourced. I would like to think we're not competing with anybody. I mean, I don't need to take somebody, but the folks who can buy TV ads, the folks who have billboards, there's
people who can open 3 shops within a certain radius.
Yes, for instance, that's there. We've been in the top 10 of the newspaper's restaurant list for most of the time that we've been open, and there's still so much of Austin that doesn't know we exist.
Right.
So there's only so much we can do, and so I know that we're not really competing with the other local owners, with the other small businesses here. And I am going to go back to, we're not competing with anybody. We're just trying to make sure people know who we are, and and educate people about what happens inside a restaurant.
Yeah.
If people want to spend money at that place down the street, great, because that's still good for those employees. I just want them to know that those employees are making $2.13 an hour.
That's right. It's a great point.
Well, any last thoughts on, running a more sustainable restaurant business, or focusing on wellness, employee wellness?
No, I mean, I think I don't have I should have one like big sentence to sum it all up. No, please. I mean, when you're in Austin, come see us. Check out goodworkaustin.org to see what kinds of things we're working on, and to see a bunch of other restaurants that are also in Central Texas that have some similar values. It really is up to it's up to guests. It's up to folks who are eating as well. Just know where you're spending your money.
Sure. Actually, I have a question. This is going to be, kind of out in our social media, like anyone that wants to support your cause. Is there any ways that they can help you out with what you're doing, not just in their own communities, but in yours as well?
Yeah, that would be at Goodwork. That would be at goodworkaustin.org. I should have been more explicit in my any money helps provide emergency meals. It helps pay for the trainings that we provide. There are we do sexual harassment prevention trainings, and there are more sexual harassment complaints from the hospitality industry than any other industry. So this is a desperately needed thing in our world. The same is true of the DEI trainings. We are not a very corporatized industry, and mostly folks just think, well, we can all just be nice to each other, right? But that's hard. That's really hard.
Yeah.
So, and having some experts in to help you with your blind spots, and help get everybody on the same page in terms of the language that we use and how we communicate with each other is really useful. So any donations to Good Work Austin, go there. And there's no offices. There's only 2 employees. It's very, very low overhead. It's
great. Awesome.
And come have dinner.
Hell yeah. I'm starving.
Yeah, well, that's the best part. It's so easy to sell what we do outside of all of this stuff, because at the restaurant we make all our own pasta, we make our bread, our fresh cheeses, our cured meats. Behind the bar we make all our own amari and vermouth. So whenever you are here, you are going to have something that you're not going to have anywhere else.
Awesome.
We're gonna have to get on a plane and go to Austin now.
Yeah, it's probably warmer than it is here.
Not today, but
okay.
we'll be back in the 80s tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic.
So you've got some time to plan.
Right on.